In 100 years, how did we go from fighters battling for glory and honor to scrapping for meaningless belts across 17 weight classes and 4 major sanctioning bodies, each with multiple titles in every division?
Well, why is there so many champions?
To understand how these numerous belts are ruining the beautiful sport of boxing, we must first dive into its rich history. This is the journey from the golden days of undisputed champions to today's cluttered and confusing landscape of professional boxing.
If a champion fight, he pays a sanctioning fee. So if a fighter has 4 belts, he pays 4 sanctioning fees.
Boxing's history is as rich and complex as the sport itself. In the beginning, it was raw and unregulated, with fighters recognized purely for their prowess and skill. There were no belts, no titles, just the glory of being the best. But as boxing gained popularity, the need for formal recognition and reward became evident. The first boxing belts were simple leather straps, symbols of excellence awarded to the best fighters in each division. These early belts marked the beginning of a new era in boxing, one where champions could be easily identified and celebrated. However, as time went on, the landscape of boxing began to change, becoming more structured but also more complicated. So how did we get here? How did boxing, a sport once defined by its simplicity and raw competition, become so fragmented and complicated? To understand this, we need to look at the evolution of boxing belts and the role of the various sanctioning bodies that have shaped the sport. Let's talk about the World Boxing Association, WBA, formerly known as the National Boxing Association, NBA, one of the earliest organizations to formalize the concept of championship belts. Founded in the early 1920s, the WBA played a pivotal role in shaping professional boxing. By introducing multiple weight classes and corresponding belts, they provided a structured way for fighters to achieve recognition. But this structure also sowed the seeds for future complications. Allegations of favoritism and inconsistent rankings plagued the WBA, casting doubt on the legitimacy of their champions. In 1963, the World Boxing Council, WBC, entered the fray, adding more belts and more complexity. Their green and gold championship belts quickly became iconic, symbolizing excellence and success. However, with these new belts came more confusion. Multiple organizations now recognize champions in various weight classes, making it difficult for fans to discern who the true champions were. This fragmentation often overshadowed the fights themselves, as debates about legitimacy took center stage. The International Boxing Federation, IBF, emerged in the early 1980s, adding yet another layer of complexity. The IBF introduced its own set of championship belts, contributing to the proliferation of titles. While their aim was to provide more structure and recognition, the result was an increasingly convoluted landscape where multiple champions existed in the same weight divisions. By 1988, the World Boxing Organization, WBO, joined the mix, further complicating the championship hierarchy. The WBO belts, like those of the WBA, WBC, and IBF, became coveted symbols of success. However, their introduction added to the already growing number of titles, leading to more confusion and debate among fans and fighters about the legitimacy of champions. This abundance of belts has created several significant issues in the sport of boxing. One of the most pressing problems is the confusion it causes among fans. With multiple champions in each weight class, even the most dedicated boxing enthusiasts struggle to keep track of who holds the true title. This confusion often leads to heated debates and disagreements, detracting from the sport itself. The proliferation of belts has also diluted the talent within each division. With so many champions, it's difficult to determine who the best fighter truly is. This dilution can diminish the prestige of holding a championship title, making it less meaningful. Furthermore, the abundance of belts raises questions about the authenticity and significance of these titles. Critics argue that the numerous championships make the sport more about marketing and less about the raw talent and skill of the boxers. The inherent politics of boxing also play a role in this complexity. The Big Four sanctioning bodies, WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO, each have their own rules and rankings, leading to a fragmented and often confusing championship landscape. Fighters like Floyd Mayweather Jr., despite their extraordinary achievements, have found it nearly impossible to unify all 4 titles due to these political barriers. Mayweather himself has criticized the abundance of belts, noting how it dilutes the sport and confuses fans.
So I just don't like it.
Let's look at recent examples. Oleksandr Usyk and Terence Crawford, 2 of the most talented boxers today, managed to unify all 4 major belts in their respective weight classes. Their achievements were as much about political maneuvering and behind-the-scenes circumstances as they were about talent. The fact that they even got the opportunity to compete for all 4 belts was a rare stroke of luck, highlighting how challenging it is to become an undisputed champion in the current system. The numerous belts also complicate matchmaking and negotiations for unification fights. Boxers holding different titles may be hesitant to risk their belts in a high-stakes showdown, leading to fewer high-profile unifying matches. This situation is exacerbated by the fact that each sanctioning body typically doesn't rank the champions of other organizations, making it even harder to arrange unification bouts. Moreover, some sanctioning bodies have introduced additional titles, like the WBA's Super Champion and the WBC's Franchise Champion, further muddying the waters. These titles often devalue the regular championships and create unnecessary complications. The WBA, for example, has been criticized for having both a super and a regular champion in the same weight class, leading to confusion about who the true champion is. As the number of belts and weight classes continues to grow, the prestige of being a world champion is diluted. The sport becomes more about collecting trinkets than about raw talent and skill. This proliferation of titles can make it harder for fans to follow the sport and for fighters to establish themselves as the best in their division. One of the most glaring issues with the proliferation of belts is how it affects the fighters themselves. Boxers are often caught in a web of political maneuvering, where securing a title shot or a unification bout is as much about connections and negotiations as it is about their in-ring performance. This can be incredibly frustrating for fighters who are at the peak of their careers, but find themselves unable to secure the fights that would define their legacies. One obvious solution is to reduce the number of sanctioning bodies, or at least have them work together more effectively. If the WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO could agree to recognize each other's champions and create a more streamlined process for unification bouts, it would significantly reduce confusion. Encouraging mandatory unification fights and ranking champions from other organizations in the top contender spots would ensure that the best face the best. Another critical step is to address the issue of multiple titles within a single sanctioning body. The WBA's Super and Regular champions, as well as the WBC's Franchise Champion, need to be re-evaluated. These additional titles often create unnecessary complexity and dilute the prestige of holding a championship belt. Returning to a single champion per weight class within each organization would help clarify who the true champions are. Reducing the number of weight classes could also bring more clarity. Currently, there are 17 weight classes, each with multiple champions. Returning to a smaller number of weight classes would increase competition and make it easier for fans to follow the sport. A more straightforward structure, similar to the original 8 weight classes with the addition of a cruiserweight division, could restore the significance of being a world champion. Let's hope the sport takes the necessary steps to clean up this mess and deliver the clarity and excitement that fans and fighters deserve. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to support our channel by smashing the like button and subscribing to our channel.